Hello. So thank you all for coming to this talk. It's probably your last talk of the day, so I appreciate people sticking around. My name is Greg Lindahl, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Common Crawl Foundation. Let's see. Woo. Okay, so we are a nonprofit. And when you see people saying that they trained artificial intelligence or machine learning or whatever off of web data, likely they actually mean our data set. So we date back to 2007, and we were founded by a guy named Gil Elbaz, who sold his company. Sure. Gil Elbaz, who sold his company to Google before they IPO'd. And so at that point, he had seen how beautiful the data was inside of Google, and he was wondering, where is the next Google going to come from? So he founded Common Crawl, and he funded it himself, and he hired an engineer, and over the years he had one engineer, and gradually usage took off. And so this is the PyTorch conference. This is my first time at PyTorch. And frequently, people use PyTorch to either process Common Crawl directly, or they use a data set that is derived from Common Crawl. So for example, FineWeb is 100% derived from Common Crawl. At this point, we've been cited in over 10,000 research papers. So here's our exponential growth. So the last bar is 2025, so that's only 3/4 of a year. So it's not exactly exponential, but it looks pretty good. So there's a whole ton of use cases for Common Crawl data, more than the PyTorch community. So there have been a couple of search engines that sort of started with Common Crawl as their bases. There's a bunch of people who do digital humanities with it, and especially if you want to study relatively obscure languages, for example, Nigerian Pidgin. The BBC is the biggest source of Nigerian Pidgin, and the entire Nigerian Pidgin academic community studies Nigerian Pidgin out of our data set. That's a foreshadowing because the BBC insisted that we erase that data set. So that's where we're headed. And then finally, AI and machine learning training. So that's the PyTorch community. So our mission is to make this data set available and make it really available. So it's actually free to download. Thank you to Amazon and Jeff Bezos. And we support a lot of people making, data-driven decisions. So, for example, one of our UK partners that I wrote, my first letter of support that I wrote after I started at Common Crawl 2.5 years ago full-time, was to a UK researcher who was researching small businesses in the UK on the web. And he found them in Common Crawl. That last point is super important to us. So we want to preserve every language, community, and culture that's there on the web as best we can. So we have a very open mind as to how much we should work on lower resource languages. So the size of our data set, so it's 10 petabytes of data. It's 30 billion web pages. It started 17 years ago. So I became an advisor to Common Crawl in 2012. And we add about 2.5 billion pages a month. And they're divided up into 108 separate crawls at this point, and we add one every month. And we have a bunch of other additional data products. So for example, the web is a graph, and we have a graph of the web that you can study if you want to. We also have a host index, which rolls up all the individual web pages, and so you can see sort of what's going on a host-by-host basis. Is this website 50% English and 50% French? That number's in the host index. This is downloads of our data. Last year, we nearly reached 1 exabyte of downloads. So that's the 10 petabyte data set being downloaded fully 100 times. And we have a bunch of different data products, and that's the different colors on this graph. And the numbers aren't particularly important, but in the AWS Open Dataset Sponsorship Program, we have the largest outgoing bandwidth. We're not the largest bucket in size, but we're the most active bucket for downloads. So we want to have a representative data set of the web. We're text only, and so we worry about breadth and depth and freshness, and we don't want too many duplicates, and we want good regional coverage. We want quality, whatever that means. And then there's a bunch of different use cases, and we try to support all of them at the same time. So it's a very unfiltered data set, and as I tell people, look, if you want to study hate speech on the internet, we have your data set. And once you've figured out what hate speech is, then you can remove it. But we're not going to remove it from our crawl because other people want to also research hate speech, and hate speech changes over time. So this is sort of a summary back to the beginning of the freshness. So as you can see, we mainly revisit web pages in the modern era. That's because the good parts of the web don't actually change that quickly. And you can sort of see us evolving over time. And quality pretty much gets better starting at about 2016. So we're actually on the right track according to the quality measures that we use internally. Okay, so we crawl the web, and we're the politest web crawler ever. We crawl extremely slowly, so we don't crawl more than 2 web pages a second. We respect robots.txt, even though people don't agree on what robots.txt means. We also pay attention to URL-level tags and HTML headers, and we preserve all of this information so that anybody using our data set can see if they're unwanted by a website. We also identify ourselves when we crawl. And we crawl from a fixed list of IP addresses, and we have a reverse DNS. And so if you can verify that if you see our bot, CCBot, on your website, whether or not that's someone lying that they're CCBot or if that's actually us. So the robots.txt, as I mentioned, it's a file that allows website owners to say what crawlers should and shouldn't crawl, and different crawlers can have different rules. This was only standardized in 2022, and people don't actually agree about what that standard means, and so there's another effort going on to do another standard, which we're taking part in, and it's widely used. So here's a 2022 example, and so this is the BBC before they blocked us. And so this is mainly technically related, right? They don't want search engines using their search interface on bbc.com, and that's totally fine. And there's a couple of bad bots that are disallowed, and then there's actually dedicated rules for Google and Bing, which are the 2 largest search engines. So here's 2025, and you notice there's a very large number of user agents which are entirely disallowed, and this is because of the rise of ChatGPT. So here we are in the era of AI panic. When GPT-3 got released to the academic community in 2020, nobody really noticed. But when ChatGPT released a web interface in November 2022, everybody noticed. And the initial backlash to that mentioned 2 user agents for robots, ChatGPT and CCBot. And so we became widely blocked eventually after that. And I'll tell you what the consequences of that are both in size and in data quality in future slides. The backlash then grew much worse because there's a bunch of anonymous, unknown, probably AI bots out there aggressively crawling the web. And so when you see someone, you see a company that says they have their own crawl and their own data set and no one has ever seen their user agent, they're stealth crawling. And so XAI would be an example of that nobody's ever seen their crawler. And because of this, website infrastructure providers, so Cloudflare and WordPress, saw this as a marketing opportunity. And so that's caused bad things to happen both in robots.txt entries and also bot defenses. So Cloudflare manages the robots.txt for 3.8 million websites, and they call us an AI crawler, even though we're used for many different things. And that decision was made by the CEO, and he can do whatever he wants. He controls 20% of the internet. So there we are. And then the WordPress CEO said he was going to block us in robots.txt, and we said to him, you don't own any of the content on any of those WordPress blogs. Your users own that content. They should decide whether or not they should get crawled. So he went home and he instituted a rate limit where we're only allowed to crawl like 1 page a day. So there we go. So that's bot blocking. And I hope to have bot blocking numbers for this talk, but I didn't get them done in time. So that's the AI panic. So let's measure the AI panic. So the basic idea, right, is that at some point, right, so November 2022 is on the far left of this graph. But when you talk about blocking, it doesn't make any sense to just talk about the entire internet, right? The internet is a power law, just like everything else. And so you should talk about different sizes of measures in the top websites, and so you need a way of ranking websites, and we have search engine style ranks, and there's people publish other rankings. So this one uses somebody else's ranking. So the top line is the top 5,000 websites, and then the lower line is the top 100,000 websites. And so as you can see, we're more frequently blocked by the more important websites. And this has an effect on web crawling. And so in this chart, GPT-bot is the most hated crawler, and we're number 2. Woo! Sorry, and in this chart, actually what it's showing is the top 1,000, top 10,000, top 50,000, ... So the highest line is the most important but smallest number of websites, and the very bottom line is the top 2 million websites. So as you can see, the more important a website is, the more likely it is to block CC-bot in particular. So now, what about other user agents? So the top line on this chart is GPT-bot, and the second top line is us. And remember, November 2022 was the magic date, but the panic didn't really break out until the middle of 2023. And you can see that there are some bots that are not particularly affected, and other ones are strongly affected. So let's do this by sector. So now we're changing how the thing is done. So 1 means you're blocked by the default user agent of star. And so on this chart, so 1 is star, and the things that are blocked less than star are Bing and Google. And the thing on the top is GPT-bot, and the second one is CC-bot. Okay, so now let's do it by sectors. If you look at search engines, you'll notice that there's no bump in this graph. So search engine crawlers have not been blocked in particular. Search engine optimization is a thing that there are companies that provide datasets for, and as you can see, there's no significant change over time for SEO. Web archiving, so the Internet Archive was blocked more than CC-bot back in the good old days, but now CC-bot is number 1. We're more blocked than the Internet Archive. And we're about a third their size, by the way. So for AI crawlers, which the CEO of Cloudflare considers us to be an AI crawler, as you can see, all of those are affected. So this AI panic is mainly affecting AI crawlers in particular. There's also AI, there's search, which is RAG, and then there's agents. And so as you can see for both of those, there's also an effect of people getting blocked, even though you might want to choose to allow search and agents because you're trying to sell something. But yeah, it seems to be that a lot of those are also affected. Okay, so now let's flip it over and let's look at the impact on AI training. So in this chart, the dashed lines are the top 2,000 websites in these 3 corpuses. And then the lower line is a random selection of the entire corpus. So as you can see, it's mainly affecting the head of the training data and doesn't have very much effect on the training data overall. So if you look at ablation studies of AI models, it turns out that if you leave out the New York Times, your model isn't really hurt by it. It's only slightly worse. Whereas the New York Times thinks they're the most important newspaper in the history of mankind, and you should pay them a lot of money to train on their content, it actually doesn't have very much value. And you can do this split by category, and so you notice that the one on the right, that the shopping and auctions category has the least blocking of anything. And then this is politics. So the left side is left-wing news websites, and the right side is right-wing news websites. And as you can see, what's going on is that most of the blocking is for centrist websites, whereas the most rabid websites on the left and right have the least amount of blocking. So this introduces an unfortunate impact in training data that, if you want to study the news on the web, it's getting much more difficult over time because our data set is much less complete, and it's less complete in a biased way. So legal and policy, there's sort of stuff going on at the IETF to update the robots.txt preference to include AI preferences, and it's going really poorly. So I don't expect that to ever finish. And there's some people who think that you can convince crawlers to pay for data, but that's never going to work because the people who are stealth crawling are going to stealth crawl. And all those people, block us anyway. There's just a lot of talking and nothing actually happened. But let me tell you a policy trend, so that the bottom half of this slide. So when people send us a letter demanding that we erase all of their data from our archive, we put them on a list because people have downloaded our data set already, and the only way to remove that data that was downloaded in the past is to publish a list and say, you shouldn't use this data because this company is very litigious. There's a list of 4 felonies that almost all of them accuse me personally of, and I love getting these letters. I've been getting about 5 a week from French publishers, but it's very much mainly the news industry. So we would like people who use our data to start filtering out the data from people who have opted out. And here's the number of opt-out requests per year. So as you can see, it's exponential. We're only 9 months into 2025, and it's already a winner. So here we are. So consent in crisis. So the funny thing here is that we're a nonprofit. We produce a data set, and it's used for all kinds of things. And if you sue us, first, we don't have any money, and secondly, a U.S. court is very likely to find that it's fair use, and if that creates a precedent, then everyone would be on the publishing side would be annoyed, and so no one's ever going to actually sue us. But we sure get harassed a lot, and there's no agreement in between publishers who own the copyrights and all the different variety of communities that would like to use that data to do stuff. And remember, we're talking about the public web here, right? We don't go behind a paywall. We don't log into any website, right? But knowledge, the most important thing you need to know is the location of the library. So finally, to talk a little bit about languages. Our crawl is pretty much focused on English. And if you look at the crawl statistics in 2013, we got worse. We became more English dominated, and that's my fault because I donated a bunch of metadata from my search engine, and of course, our search engine was focused on English because is the market with all the money. So I actually made things worse. It's been getting better over time. But most of the data comes from the web, and we're trying to find these rare languages. And so here's on the left side sort of a diagram of what the world is like in terms of what people actually speak. And that looks nothing like our actual distribution. And on the right is the distribution of source code. And we're the wrong place to look for a source code crawl anyway, but we don't do a very good job on that. So here's top domains by geography, and here they are by geographical coverage, blah, blah, blah. And so that badness that I mentioned, it's the blue is English. That's .com and .net. Effectively, that's English. And as you can see, it got worse in 2013. That part became taller, and only recently did we recover. So we're working on this, and so we have stuff that we're doing. So we got the web languages project. So if you know my personal history, I've been involved in 2 major crowdsourcing things. The first was the Open Directory project, which preceded Wikipedia and inspired Wikipedia, ODP. Also called DMOZ, so dmoz.org was the domain. And then my search engine Bleco also had a 2,000 crowdsourced lists that were on top of our search engine. And so we had 2,000 vertical search engines built into our main search engines. Here we go for the 3rd time. So this is about language, community, and culture, and we use this to steer the crawler in the right direction. So it's actually a GitHub thing. So if you happen to be a native speaker of a language other than English and would love to fill out your personal language, community, or culture, please have a look. It's in the Common Crawl GitHub web-languages. So we're also working on language identification. So browsers already have this, but they're not very good at it. And people do foolish things like they train a language identifier on using the Bible as a parallel text, and everybody knows that the Bible is not written in standard English, right? It's not written in a standard. It's flowery compared to normal speech, and it's nothing like colloquial speech in any language. So we're trying to capture colloquial and normal speech from different communities and cultures, not just languages. So we held a workshop about this. We ran a workshop 2 weeks ago, so that's coming along. So here I am at the end of my talk. So we'll have a Q&A in a few seconds. But okay, so the AI panic is definitely hurting the tip of our data set, but we don't believe it's significantly hurting artificial intelligence or machine learning uses of the data set. We currently classify that state-of-the-art 160 languages, but we want to support many more. There are nearly 8,000 living languages, a lot of which aren't on the web at all. And we'd like to support as many of those as we can. We're crowdsourcing information in 2 different ways for this language coverage. And then finally, we're involved in all this IETF stuff that's going on. So that's the end of my talk. There's a portable microphone if people want to ask some questions.
Oh, okay. So 2 questions. First one is, with respect to kind of AI generated data that's kind of part of the AI panic hurting the tip thing, are you guys doing anything to kind of identify or label or attempt to do so on any of the data sets that you have, whether something is AI generated or not?
I'm an astronomer, and when physicists build stuff that measures radiation, you often want to get steel that predates the beginning of nuclear testing, and it's called low background steel.
Yes.
And so somebody raised a World War II warship and melted it down, and they will sell you low background steel. Everybody knows the day that ChatGPT was released. So you can use, all of our older data is in our archive, so you can use that. You can compare that to the present. So we don't do any of these things, but you compare it to the present. And then bad AI probably isn't popular. And so because we have a search engine attitude towards quality, in theory, we're reasonably resistant to that. But no, that's something that on the whole, we hope our partners will do.
Awesome, cool. Second question was, you mentioned Wikipedia as well. That made up kind of 5% of your data. I've heard recently, studies are showing that Wikipedia is dying out because everyone is just going to AI and asking questions and not actually reading Wikipedia. And Wikipedia actually has a problem where not only is your aggregate traffic going down, but their traffic is distribution-wise is being replaced with a lot more like crawlers than human traffic to Wikipedia, such that they've literally had to like make data sets available. What do you think like projects like Common Crawl do to kind of affect the future of sites like Wikipedia and whatnot?
So the first thing, so people when they say they use Wikipedia data, they go directly to Wikipedia for it because we're the worst possible place. We only have a sample of Wikipedia, and we have it in a bad format. So people go directly to Wikipedia, and as you know, right? It's a crowdsourced thing, and so fads come and go. The Open Directory project is long dead. Wikipedia lives on. The number of editors is falling. I'm an angry early Wikipedia editor, mad that people deleted a bunch of web pages that mentioned me. So all these things play into it, and I don't think Common Crawl is going to end up having any effect on Wikipedia. We wish them the best, but we're not going to directly end up having any effect on them. And they have challenges, we have challenges, everybody's got challenges.
Would you mind showing us again the language distribution slide? You went through it super quickly, and I would love to have your comments about the trends there and whether you are getting any requests from foreign countries that are looking at having some sort of sovereignty over foundation models, whether you see any trends in that space. Thank you.
So this chart is by language, not by domain name. And the two highlighted lines are English and Russian, which are the top two languages in our crawl. Yes, we hear from people about sovereign language stuff. And so humorously, I accidentally hired the top two postdocs in language identification who were both Europeans. And one of them got a call from Microsoft, and they wanted to fund his graduate student project. And he's like, well, I work at the Common Crawl Foundation now. So they gave us the money. And then they met with the French president and dropped our name. And that's cool. And the reason that the French president is interested in this is because France wants not only a sovereign French model, but they also want all of their regional languages to be in it. Right? And there's like more than a dozen French regional languages. And so every country in the EU wants to do that, and we're working with them to different degrees. So sometimes, it's an organization that works with us, sometimes it's individuals. And we really appreciate the interest in that kind of stuff.
Why is Chinese so underrepresented?
So the question is, why is Chinese so underrepresented? So the Great Firewall of China is double-sided. So we do crawl Taiwan and Singapore, and that as part of web languages. I said language, community, and culture. So I'm hoping to dramatically. So we already have a good Taiwanese list of important websites, and we don't have one for Singapore yet. So we would love to do a better job with that. And that's also true for languages like French and Spanish, where they're the national language of a lot of countries that are former colonies. So that is part of the web languages effort to make sure that we cover all those different geographies. But we're not there yet.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by the Great Firewall is double-sided? Because the last time I checked, you could access Chinese websites from overseas.
100% of them?
Yeah. If you can access them in China, you can access them.
So my crawl says no. Just saying.
Okay, so what percentage of websites are?
I have not analyzed the details. I just know that we have a problem crawling in China.
Huh, okay, cool.
Okay, so yeah, it's, I'm at the, yeah, I'm at the shrugging stage too. It's on my roadmap. Yeah. My clever idea is to try to crawl from Hong Kong because Hong Kong is special on the outgoing side, so maybe it's special on the ingoing side too. But who knows?
What percentage of your data set would you say is from pre-existing data sets like Wikipedia or the Internet Archive or something more obscure like text files versus something that you crawled one page at a time?
So we crawl, web pages, right? So if somebody puts up a data set and it's Parquet files, we're not going to crawl it. Is that what you were aiming at?
I mean, they're still websites, essentially. So there's still open data sets that are websites and have web pages. So if you're crawling them, would you still pull them in? And is there a quality difference in terms of what you get yourself versus something that you get from like one just giant website which just also took other websites?
So probably that is, a problem in our data set, and hopefully it's minimized by our search engine attitude about more important websites. So there are a zillion copies of Wikipedia. They're all slightly different from Wikipedia because they're clones of, usually a clone of Wikipedia on a particular day. And Wikipedia changes rapidly over time. So all that's in our crawl, and it's bad for AI purposes because one way to poison a crawl is to repeat the same information slightly differently 100,000 times in the input data. And so that is a problem. However, none of these Wikipedia's copies are popular. That's the hope, and it seems to kind of work that way. But I actually have a project that's just kicking off. So I have a funder who's very interested in data poisoning, and we're going to run some projects along those lines and see. And because we know the Wikipedia example, and it's easy to see just from the names of the pages. If you keep the same names that are in Wikipedia, then it's really easy to see there's a copy of Wikipedia. So I will tell you about that next year.
Hi, thanks. This is just a passing curiosity, but there was a table you showed about the composition of LLM data, and I'm just curious what the source of that data was. I missed that. It showed books, web, periodicals, other things, and I'm just curious about that because I'm also curious if you're aware of efforts to include more published text in LLMs. It's just not something I thought about until I saw that.
So it's certainly common that people do want to include other stuff, and we're not directly involved in that. We actually are interested in adding more data products. So, for example, structured and unstructured data sets. So one example of structured data is microformats. So it's very common that restaurants and recipes in particular use this special markup in the HTML, and Google will emphasize your website for searches related to restaurants and recipes if you have that markup. So that becomes an interesting data set in and of itself, and it doesn't appear unless you do special processing of the data. So we have a partner, the webdatacommons.org, that's been doing one crawl a year with that, and so we're planning on productizing that and then producing it for every month, and that'll be an example of a structured data set. It'll still have flaws because some of the data is just wrong, but in general it works pretty well. And so for restaurants, especially, you can really figure out where they are, right? Because in a typical restaurant website, the address of the the address of the restaurant is in a JPEG, and you're like, how is this possible? Right, but it's true, and then usually it's in the microformat. It's there in plain text.
Here, right here. So I think one of your key points was the so-called AI panic hasn't hurt the quality of the LLM responses. Is that right? So far.
I'm not really understanding what you're saying, sorry.
You had a takeaway about the quote-unquote AI panic, about more sites blocking AI crawlers, and saying that that still hasn't affected AI response quality yet. But is that mainly because they still have archives of prior archives which are still adequate to give good responses, but eventually, as more and more sites start blocking AI crawlers, I mean, obviously, it will impact quality, right? I mean, so I'm not clear about your thesis there. Like, are you saying that it's okay that more sites are blocking crawlers because that is not affecting the LLMs yet?
So I made two assertions backed up with facts. The first one is this slide, which says that we're blocked on a lot of the top websites, but not in the top 2 million websites very much. And then the second one was impact on training data, that again, the training data from the top websites has disappeared, but the quality of the remaining data is pretty good. In an ablation study, you can prove that you're not missing out very much yet. So sadly, I do not have an ablation study in these slides, but there are papers that have that.
But of course, eventually, as more and more start.
So that depends on whether or not more and more sites block us. So if you watch the SEO community, right? So if you want to sell widgets, you want your widget selling website to be at the top of buy a widget on Google's search engine, right? So a lot of people have realized that they also want to be in the top of the new search engine, right? So Google, for a while, they decided they wanted to block my ad blocked and Firefox. And so I started using ChatGPT as my search engine, and it's pretty good. I mean, I've built a search engine. I've evaluated, a lot of search engines, and ChatGPT is pretty good. And so the SEO community has woken up, and so there's this new term, and people use 5 different terms, but I call it AIO, artificial intelligence optimization. And they're saying, look, you do want your content in the pre-training data for LLMs so that ChatGPT and everybody else is going to mention you when there's something relevant to your business. And so I think that the backlash is going to have a counter backlash, and the amount of blocking may stop rising at some point in the future. And as you can see, the amount of blocking did peak and move around a little bit. So it's unclear exactly what's going on now, right? But 12 months ago, the peak was 12 months ago. So who knows what the future will bring. These are really great questions, by the way. I appreciate having a very attentive, engaged audience.
Yeah, I saw on page 6 that you mentioned that you have 300 billion web pages. I'm curious to know what is the strategy, like you crawl the top domain, second domain, and the more later the sub pages. Since like for many social media like YouTube, there's already like billion just under YouTube. Definitely you only sample very small of it, but that may be very valuable information if you continue to get all the information. Thank you.
So we're terrible at crawling YouTube, and part of this is because it's too large, right? So our politeness is such that we'll never crawl more than 2 pages in a second. So we don't fully crawl Amazon even over all the years, right? Our sample of Amazon is nowhere close to 100% of the products on Amazon. So the basic strategy is we build a search engine style score similar to PageRank, and the higher that score is, the larger a crawl budget each particular web host has. And that keeps us out of crawler traps. It keeps us away from crawling overly SEO'd stuff. It is a big quality improvement, and it's not a perfect score, but even an imperfect score is enough to keep us in the better part of the web.
How do you foresee Common Crawl becoming even more impactful and useful for building models and for companies like innovating and all of this stuff?
So did you say sovereign models?
Oh, no. Yeah, my question is, in what ways do you foresee Common Crawl to become more impactful over time and helping to improve models?
I mentioned the web graph. So we've been generating the web graph since 2017, but it uses an idiosyncratic graph format, and so nobody outside of us has ever looked at it. The web graph is an incredible graph, so in like 2 days, I'm publishing a testing version of a conversion of it to Neo4j, so that it's no longer an idiosyncratic format and is something that anybody can use. So these new data products, I think, will be very helpful. Secondly, we're improving the ability of people to generate annotations of both web pages and hosts. So for example, if you wanted to run your own language classifier or your own topic classifier, you could do that, and then you could publish the annotation and other people could use it. And then the next step is the ability to select out a small amount of a crawl and then have that be repackaged into a small number of 1 gigabyte files that you can then process on your laptop, right? And maybe that file ought to be a zip file where all the content is in individual files and then all the metadata is in a spreadsheet. So that's the digital humanities version of it. So these are all things that are on my roadmap, and I hopefully will have shipped in the next year. We grew 3.5x between last year and this year. So suddenly we're getting a lot more done. We're out of time, I guess. Okay, so thank you all. Happy to chat with people because there's like one more round of talks, but not in this room. So I'd be happy to chat with people here. And thank you for listening and all the great questions.